Welcome to a quiet moment at the end of your day. Let your thoughts settle. There is no urgency here. We are going to explore something specific and small. The inside of a truck cabin, a winter night, the way people sleep when the world outside drops to 35 degrees below zero. This is the story of Canadian long-haul truckers, the men and women who drive through winter darkness across distances most of us cannot imagine, who park their trucks in frozen emptiness, who sleep in metal boxes surrounded by cold that can kill. But tonight, we are not focusing on danger. We are focusing on warmth, on the small, practical ways human beings make a home in the most unlikely places, on the routines and tools and quiet rituals that allow sleep to happen when everything outside is hostile. So settle in. Slow your breathing. We will move through this together, one detail at a time. No rush, no drama, just the steady unfolding of how life works when the temperature falls and the highway stretches endlessly in both directions. Let us begin. The sleeper cab is not large. In most modern long-haul trucks, it measures roughly 6 to 8 feet in length, 7 to 8 feet in width. The ceiling height allows most drivers to sit upright on the bed, but not to stand fully. This is the entire living space. Bedroom, kitchen, storage, and refuge, compressed into a metal box behind the driver's seat. It is not meant to feel like a home, but it becomes one. The bed dominates the space. It runs along the back wall, a mattress fitted into a permanent frame. The original mattress, the one installed by the manufacturer, is rarely the one drivers sleep on. Most replace it within the first year. They choose firmer foam or memory foam, or even custom mattresses cut to fit the exact dimensions of the frame. The bed is where they will spend 250 to 300 nights each year. It must be right. Above the bed, storage compartments, narrow cabinets built into the walls. These hold clothes, spare blankets, tools, food supplies, personal items. Everything must fit. There is no room for excess. Drivers learn to pare down their belongings to essentials. 1 week of clothing, a heavy winter coat, gloves, thermal layers, a few books or a tablet, photographs. The photographs matter. Taped to the walls or tucked into the edges of the overhead compartments, these images anchor the space to something beyond the highway. A partner, children, a dog, a house that exists somewhere far from here. The photographs do not make the cab feel like that house, but they make it feel like it belongs to someone, that it is not just a vehicle, that someone lives here. Some drivers add curtains, not the heavy blackout curtains that separate the sleeper from the cab. Those come standard. Personal curtains, fabric chosen for color or pattern, hung over the small windows on either side of the sleeper. These serve a dual purpose. They block light, but they also soften the industrial edges of the space. They make it feel less like a machine. A small refrigerator sits in one corner, not in all trucks, but in many. A compact unit, barely 2 feet tall, capable of holding milk, sandwich ingredients, drinks, a few pieces of fruit. Beside it, or mounted nearby, sometimes a microwave. 12-volt models that run off the truck's electrical system, used for reheating meals, making coffee, warming soup. The space is organized with obsessive precision. Every item has a place. The driver knows exactly where the flashlight is kept, where the spare batteries are stored, where the charging cables run, where the extra thermal socks are tucked. This is not merely tidiness, it is survival. At 2 a.m, in complete darkness, when something is needed, there is no time to search. The hand reaches, the item is there. Personalization varies wildly. Some drivers keep the sleeper minimal, functional. Clean surfaces, few decorations, everything stowed. The space remains neutral, almost impersonal, as if they are visitors in their own truck. Others transform it. String lights along the ceiling edges, small battery-powered lamps for softer illumination, a favorite blanket from home, worn and familiar, a particular pillow, a radio tuned to a station they have followed for years, a wooden cross or a small statue, or a dream catcher hanging from the ceiling grab handle. These are not just decorations. They are psychological anchors, reminders that this metal box is theirs, that they have made a home, however small, however temporary. The sleeper cab is entirely separate from the outside world. During the day, while driving, it is background, a space behind the seats, curtained off, not thought about. But when the truck stops, when the parking brake is set and the engine shuts down, the sleeper becomes everything. The driver pulls the curtain closed between the cab and the sleeper. The front of the truck, the steering wheel, the dashboard, the windshield looking out onto the parking lot or the roadside, ceases to exist. What remains is this small room. The transformation happens quickly. Boots off, coat hung on the hook by the bed, the microwave humming as it heats dinner, the heater unit ticking as it cycles warm air through the space. The driver sits on the edge of the bed, back against the wall, eating from a bowl held in both hands. Outside, the temperature is 30 below zero. Inside, it is warm. The air smells like coffee and diesel and whatever was just heated for dinner. The light is soft. The space is quiet. This is home. For tonight. For 250 nights this year. The sleeper cab was designed to be functional, a place to rest between shifts. But function alone does not sustain a person through months on the road. Drivers need more than a bed. They need a space that feels like theirs, that holds their habits and their belongings and their small comforts. So they build it, piece by piece, trip by trip. A new blanket purchased at a truck stop in Saskatchewan, a better pillow bought online and delivered to a terminal in Ontario, a photograph added to the wall after a visit home, a reading light clipped to the edge of the overhead cabinet because the built-in lighting is too harsh. The truck becomes familiar. The driver knows the exact angle to pull the curtain so it stays closed, the specific spot on the mattress that is most comfortable, the sound the heater makes when it is functioning correctly, the faint rattle from the cabinet door that does not latch perfectly. These details matter. They are the difference between living in a vehicle and living in a space that belongs to you. The sleeper cab is small, confined, industrial, but it is also the warmest place for hundreds of kilometers in winter. It is where sleep happens, where meals are eaten, where the driver sits in the evening, door locked, heater running, and lets the day fall away. It is a metal box, but it is home. Canada is not built on the same scale as other places. The distances between cities are not unusual. They are extreme. A driver leaving Thunder Bay, Ontario, heading west toward Winnipeg, will cover over 700 kilometers before reaching the next major city. Most of that distance is forest, rock, lakes. Small towns appear briefly, then vanish in the rearview mirror. This is not the exception. This is normal. Canadian highways stretch across geography that resists human presence. The Trans-Canada Highway runs nearly 8,000 kilometers from coast to coast. Much of it passes through regions where towns are separated by hours of empty road. Gas stations exist at intervals that require planning. Truck stops are not frequent. Services cannot be assumed. In winter, this vastness becomes something more than distance. It becomes isolation. The highway itself remains passable most of the time. Plows run regularly on major routes. Salt and sand are applied. But between the towns, between the service centers, there is nothing. No lights, no buildings, no movement except the occasional vehicle passing in the opposite direction. Headlights briefly visible, then gone. A driver traveling Highway 11 through northern Ontario in January will pass through stretches where the forest presses close on both sides. Spruce and pine, dark even in daylight, invisible at night. The road is a corridor through wilderness. For kilometers at a time, there are no intersections, no side roads, no driveways, just the highway, 2 lanes of asphalt, and the endless trees. The distances affect everything. Fuel must be managed carefully. A full tank might cover 900 to 1,000 kilometers, depending on load and conditions. But in winter, fuel consumption increases. Heaters run. Engines work harder in cold air. The margin for error shrinks. Drivers learn to refuel before the tank drops below a quarter. Not because they will run out, but because there might not be another station for 200 kilometers. And if there is a station, it might be closed, or out of fuel, or unreachable due to weather. The same calculation applies to food, to water, to rest. A driver cannot simply stop when tired. They must stop where stopping is possible, where there is a pull-off wide enough for the truck, where the shoulder is plowed, where it is safe to park for the night. These locations are not random. They are known, marked mentally on every route. Rest stops, truck stops, wide sections of shoulder on straight stretches of highway, chain-up areas where trucks pull off to install tire chains in deep snow. Between these points, stopping is not an option. The shoulder might be too narrow, or unplowed, buried in snowdrifts, or on a curve where visibility is poor, and another vehicle could strike the parked truck. The driver continues. Even if fatigue is setting in, even if 8 hours behind the wheel has become 9, then 10, they continue until a safe location appears. Canadian law allows for flexibility. Hours of service regulations permit 14-hour windows with 11 hours of driving. But the regulations assume services are available. That rest can happen when needed. In much of Canada, especially in winter, this assumption does not hold. So drivers adapt. They plan routes around known stopping points. They communicate with other drivers, sharing information about which truck stops have space, which rest areas are plowed, which towns have parking that can fit a full-size rig. This knowledge is not written down. It is accumulated through experience, shared through CB radio conversations and online forums and brief exchanges in truck stop parking lots. The isolation is not metaphorical. In summer, a breakdown on a remote stretch of highway is inconvenient. In winter, it is dangerous. Cell phone coverage is unreliable across much of northern Canada. A driver whose truck fails mechanically might wait hours for assistance. If the failure happens at night, in a blizzard, help might not arrive until morning. This is why preparation matters. Why experienced drivers carry extra fuel, spare coolant, tools, emergency supplies, blankets beyond what they use for sleeping, food that does not require cooking, water stored in insulated containers so it does not freeze. The landscape itself is hostile in winter. Temperatures across the prairies and northern routes regularly drop to -30 Celsius. -40 is not rare. At these temperatures, metal becomes brittle. Rubber hardens. Diesel fuel begins to gel despite winter additives. Batteries lose capacity. A truck that starts easily at -10 might not start at all at -40. And if the truck does not start, the heater does not run. The vastness means there is no walking to safety. The distance between a broken-down truck and the nearest town might be 50 kilometers, 100, more. In -30 cold, exposed to wind, a person on foot will develop frostbite within minutes. Hypothermia follows quickly, so the truck is everything: shelter, heat, survival. Drivers traveling routes like the Yellowhead Highway through Saskatchewan and Alberta, or Highway 17 along the north shore of Lake Superior, understand this implicitly. The highway is civilization. The truck is home. Everything beyond is wilderness, beautiful in daylight, indifferent at night. The vastness also means solitude. For hours at a time, a driver might see no other vehicles. The highway belongs to them alone. The headlights illuminate falling snow, the white lines of the road, nothing else. The radio plays or does not. The heater hums. The wipers sweep snow from the windshield in steady rhythm. There is no one to talk to, no one nearby. The cities, Toronto, Winnipeg, Calgary, are distant concepts. Out here, there is only the road, the truck, the driver. This solitude is part of the job. Some drivers seek it. They prefer the quiet, the absence of people, the long hours alone with their thoughts. Others tolerate it, accept it as the price of the work. A few cannot sustain it. They leave the profession, return to jobs where human contact is regular and proximity to others is assumed. But those who remain learn to live within the vastness. They develop routines that fill the silence. Audiobooks, podcasts, music playlists that last the length of a province. They talk to family by phone when coverage allows. They stop at the same truck stops, recognize the same staff, exchange a few words that break the isolation briefly before continuing. The vastness shapes the culture of Canadian trucking. Drivers become self-reliant by necessity. They troubleshoot mechanical problems themselves because waiting for a mechanic might mean waiting until morning or longer. They navigate weather that would shut down highways in other regions. They accept that comfort is something they create, not something provided. And at night, when the truck is parked and the engine is off and the heater is running, the vastness surrounds them. Outside the windows, darkness, absolute. No streetlights, no buildings. Sometimes the faint glow of a distant town visible on the horizon. More often, nothing. The wind moves across the empty land. Snow drifts across the highway. The cold presses against the thin metal walls of the sleeper cab. Inside, warmth, light, a small space carved out of the immensity. The driver sits on the bed, back against the wall, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. The heater ticks. The wind hums. This is the context. This is where the work happens. This is the scale that makes a warm sleeper cab not just a convenience, but a necessity. The vastness does not change. The cold does not relent. But the truck is warm. The bed is ready. And tomorrow, the highway continues. The glowing window of the sleeper cab, small against the frozen darkness. Warm light spilling onto snow. This is where we leave the story for now. Not because it is finished, but because you have seen enough, felt enough, understood what it means to make a home in a place that was never meant to hold one. Canadian truckers do this work every winter. They drive through cold that most of us will never experience. They sleep in metal boxes surrounded by emptiness. They wake before dawn and continue, carrying goods across distances that defy comprehension. They do not do it for glory. There are no audiences, no recognition, just the road, the load, the destination. But there is dignity in it, in the careful preparation, in the personalized space, in the knowledge that they can survive, and even find comfort in conditions that would break someone unprepared. The sleeper cab is small. The night is vast and cold, but inside, there is warmth, there is rest, and that is enough. Let yourself settle now. Let these images fade gently. The highway will still be there tomorrow. The trucks will still be moving. For now, there is only this, the quiet, the warmth, the slow drift toward sleep. Rest well. The question of warmth in a stationary truck was once answered with a simple solution. You left the engine running. Through the night, through every night, the main diesel engine idled continuously. It burned fuel. It produced heat. The cab stayed warm. For decades, this was simply how it worked. The sound became part of the northern landscape. Truck stops and highway rest areas hummed with the collective rumble of idling engines. The noise was constant. The exhaust was visible in cold air. But the cab stayed warm and drivers slept. The main engine of a long-haul truck is not designed for this purpose. It is built to move 70,000 pounds across highways. It generates tremendous power. Running it simply to produce heat is inefficient. But for years, there was no practical alternative. The fuel consumption was substantial. An idling diesel engine burns between 0.8 and 1 full gallon per hour. Through a 10-hour night, that meant 8 to 10 gallons consumed without the truck moving at all. Over a winter season, the cost accumulated, but cold was not negotiable. The fuel burned, and the heat came. Engine wear was another cost, hidden but real. Idling creates incomplete combustion. Carbon builds in the engine. Oil becomes contaminated. Components that should operate under load instead run inefficiently for hours. Maintenance intervals shortened. Repairs became more frequent. The engine aged faster than the kilometers it traveled suggested it should. Still, the practice continued because it worked. Warmth was guaranteed. The system was simple. Every driver understood it. You parked, you left the key turned, and you slept in the warmth the engine provided. The change came not from the industry itself, but from outside it. Environmental regulations began to address idling. Canadian provinces recognized the air quality impact of thousands of trucks idling through winter nights. Municipalities near major truck stops heard complaints about noise. Studies quantified the emissions. Laws appeared gradually, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. A 3-minute idling limit here, a 5-minute limit there. Fines began at $100. In some places they reached $500. Enforcement varied, but the legal framework was clear. Continuous idling was no longer permitted. The industry faced a problem it had never needed to solve before. How do you stay warm in a metal box at -30 when you cannot run the engine that has always provided that warmth? The answer required new technology, not modifications to existing systems, but entirely different approaches to generating heat in a stationary vehicle. The solutions had existed in other contexts: marine vessels, recreational vehicles, construction equipment. Now they needed to be adapted specifically for the long-haul trucking environment. Auxiliary power units emerged as one answer. These are small engines, separate from the main diesel engine, designed specifically to provide electrical power and heat without moving the vehicle. They mount to the truck frame. They run on the same diesel fuel, but they consume far less, perhaps 0.2 of a gallon per hour instead of a full gallon. The efficiency gain was immediate and substantial. A night that once consumed 10 gallons of fuel now consumed 2. The cost dropped. Engine wear on the main motor essentially ceased during rest periods. The APU ran, the main engine stayed silent, and warmth filled the cab. Adoption was neither instant nor universal. The units required installation. They cost several $1,000s. Older trucks needed retrofitting. Independent owner-operators had to weigh the upfront expense against long-term savings. Larger fleets could absorb the transition more easily, but gradually, the technology spread. Another solution developed alongside APUs: diesel-fired bunk heaters, small combustion units designed only to produce heat. They burned diesel fuel in a controlled chamber, heated air or coolant, and circulated that warmth through the sleeper. They consumed even less fuel than APUs, sometimes as little as 1/10 of a gallon per hour. These heaters were compact. They installed in compartments beneath bunks or in exterior mounting spaces. They operated independently of both the main engine and the truck's primary electrical system. They had one function: keep the sleeper warm. The transition represented more than a technological shift. It required drivers to trust systems they had not grown up with. The reliability of the main engine was known. It was proven. These new solutions were unfamiliar. Early adopters reported back. Word spread through truck stops and online forums. Gradually, confidence built. The change also required learning new maintenance routines. APUs and bunk heaters had their own service requirements. Filters needed changing. Fuel lines needed attention. Combustion chambers required periodic cleaning. Drivers accustomed to maintaining only the main engine now had additional systems to understand. But the advantages became undeniable. Beyond fuel savings and legal compliance, the newer systems offered quieter operation. A bunk heater's whisper replaced the main engine's rumble. Sleep quality improved. Fatigue decreased. The initial resistance gave way to acceptance, then preference. Some drivers maintained backup approaches. They carried extra blankets. They knew which truck stops offered idling exemptions in extreme cold. They understood that technology could fail and that redundancy had value. But the primary method had shifted. The era of running the main engine through every winter night had ended. The industry adapted because it had to. Regulations forced change. Economics reinforced it. Technology made it possible. What had been standard practice for decades became, within less than a generation, a relic of the past. Now a driver parks in that same frozen darkness, but the main engine goes silent. A different sound begins, smaller, quieter, but just as essential. The warmth still comes. The sleep still happens. But the method has transformed completely. The evolution continues. Newer systems integrate battery banks for all electric heating. Solar panels supplement charging. Each winter season brings refinements. But the fundamental shift has already occurred. The way Canadian truckers stay warm through winter, nights changed permanently, driven by law and enabled by innovation. The regulations appeared quietly at first. Municipal bylaws, provincial statutes, lines of text in environmental codes that most drivers never read directly. But the enforcement was real. Canadian jurisdictions began restricting engine idling with increasing seriousness through the early 2000s. The rationale was environmental. Idling contributes to local air pollution. It produces greenhouse gas emissions. In urban areas near truck stops and distribution centers, residents complained about noise and air quality. Governments responded with restrictions. The typical law established a time limit: 3 minutes in some places, 5 minutes in others. The principle was consistent. An engine could run briefly for operational needs, but not continuously for comfort. Exceptions existed for extreme cold, usually defined as temperatures below -15 or -20 Celsius. But even those exceptions had limits. Fines varied by jurisdiction: $100 for a first offense, $200 for a second. Some municipalities went higher, $500 for commercial vehicles. Enforcement happened sporadically at first, then with increasing regularity as officers became familiar with the violations. For an industry built on predictable routines, the change created friction. Drivers accustomed to decades of one practice now faced penalties for continuing it. The habit was ingrained. You parked, you left it running, you slept. Changing that pattern required conscious effort against instinct. The practical questions multiplied immediately. How do you keep a metal box warm at -35 without running the engine? What technology works reliably in extreme cold? What happens when systems fail in the middle of the night? Who pays for the equipment needed to comply with the new rules? The burden fell differently, depending on employment structure. Large trucking companies could invest in auxiliary heating systems across their fleets. They absorbed the cost as a capital expense and depreciated it over years. The transition was manageable, if not painless. Independent owner-operators faced harder choices. Each truck represented their business. The cost of an auxiliary power unit or bunk heater system came from their own savings or required financing. The expense was substantial, several $1,000s per truck. The return on investment was real, but long-term. In the short term, it strained budgets. Some drivers tried to work around the regulations. They sought parking locations outside municipal boundaries where enforcement was less likely. They moved between jurisdictions, learning which areas actively enforced idling bylaws and which did not. They accepted the occasional fine as a cost of continuing familiar practices. But the pattern was unsustainable. Fines accumulated. The risk of larger penalties increased. Insurance implications emerged. And beyond the legal pressure, the economic argument for change was undeniable. Burning 8 to 10 gallons of fuel per night, multiplied across a winter season, cost more than the equipment that could eliminate that consumption. Adaptation became necessity. Drivers who resisted change found themselves at a competitive disadvantage. Those who adopted auxiliary heating systems reduced operating costs and legal risk simultaneously. The industry conversation shifted from whether to adapt to how best to implement the adaptation. The transition period was uneven. Older trucks remained on the road longer than they might have otherwise, their owners postponing the expense of retrofitting heating systems. Newer trucks came equipped with auxiliary power units as standard or optional equipment. The fleet composition gradually transformed. Truck stops and rest areas adapted too. Some installed shore power connections, allowing trucks to plug into electrical systems rather than generating their own power. These hookups provided heat and electricity without running any onboard engine. The infrastructure appeared slowly, concentrated first in high-traffic areas, then spreading to more remote locations. The availability of electrical hookups changed parking decisions. Drivers began choosing stops not only for location and facilities, but for access to shore power. Apps and online resources tracked which locations offered electrical connections. The information became part of route planning. But electrical hookups had limitations. They required infrastructure investment. They were not available in rural areas or emergency parking situations. They depended on functioning electrical systems during winter storms that often disrupted power. They provided a supplementary solution, not a complete replacement for onboard heating capability. The legal framework continued to evolve. Some jurisdictions added temperature-based exemptions. Others increased fines for repeat violations. Enforcement patterns varied. Urban areas maintained consistent monitoring. Rural regions focused on education over penalties. The patchwork of regulations required drivers to understand rules across multiple provinces and municipalities. Industry associations advocated for clearer, more uniform standards. They argued that inconsistent regulations across jurisdictions created confusion and unequal enforcement. They pushed for temperature exemptions that reflected the genuine survival needs of northern routes. Progress was gradual. some standardization occurred, but significant variation remained. Environmental groups viewed the transition as overdue. They cited studies showing the cumulative impact of truck idling on air quality and climate. They advocated for stricter enforcement and expanded regulations. The tension between environmental priorities and practical operational needs remained unresolved in many conversations. For drivers themselves, the adaptation became simply part of the job. The initial resistance faded as newer heating systems proved reliable. The fear of equipment failure in extreme cold diminished with experience. The cost savings became tangible. The legal risk decreased. What had seemed like an impossible imposition gradually became the new normal. Some drivers even came to prefer the change. The quieter operation of bunk heaters improved sleep quality. The reduction in engine hours extended the main motor's lifespan. The environmental rationale, initially dismissed by some as abstract, gained appreciation as drivers recognized their own role in broader systems. The evolution of anti-idling regulations and industry response reflects a larger pattern. External pressure forces change. Initial resistance meets economic reality. Technology enables adaptation. What was once unthinkable becomes standard practice. The industry moves forward, different than before but still functional. Now the law is simply background knowledge. Drivers install or verify heating systems before winter. They understand local regulations. They plan accordingly. The battles of the transition period have faded. The new methods work. The winter nights remain cold, but the warmth inside the cab comes from different sources, quieter and more efficient, legal and proven. The adaptation is complete. The industry has changed, and the trucks still run through Canadian winters, carrying what needs to be carried, with drivers sleeping through frozen nights in warmth that no longer depends on idling engines. The solution arrived in the form of a small engine mounted to the outside of the truck, an auxiliary power unit, an APU. It sits below the sleeper cab, bolted to the chassis, a metal box about the size of a large suitcase. Inside, a diesel engine much smaller than the truck's main engine. This engine does not move the vehicle. It does not turn wheels or pull loads. It exists only to create heat and electricity. The APU consumes fuel at a rate incomprehensible to anyone familiar with the truck's main engine. 0.1 gallons per hour, sometimes 0.2. Where the main engine might burn a gallon every few minutes while idling, the APU sips fuel so slowly a driver can run it all night on less than 2 gallons. This efficiency changed everything. Before anti-idling laws, trucks burned 5 to 8 gallons per hour, keeping the main engine running through winter nights. Now, with the APU, that same warmth costs a fraction of the fuel. The mathematics made sense even before regulations forced the change. Companies that equipped their trucks with APUs saw fuel costs drop dramatically. Drivers who owned their own rigs recovered the installation cost within a season. The APU connects to the sleeper cab through insulated ducts. Hot air flows from the small engine into the living space. The system also generates electricity, enough to power lights, charge devices, run a small refrigerator. Everything a driver needs to live comfortably through the night. Installation happens at specialized shops. The unit mounts beneath the cab, requiring custom brackets welded to the frame. Fuel lines tap into the truck's main diesel tank. Exhaust pipes route safely away from the sleeper. Electrical connections integrate with the truck's existing systems. The installation takes a full day, sometimes 2. The APU has its own control panel inside the cab. A small display screen, temperature settings, on and off switches, diagnostic readouts that tell the driver fuel consumption rates, hours of operation, any system faults that require attention. Starting the APU becomes part of the evening routine. The driver parks for the night, secures the truck, then activates the heating system. The small engine turns over, catches, settles into a steady idle. Within minutes, warm air begins flowing into the sleeper. The sound differs from the main engine. Higher pitched, quieter. The APU hums rather than rumbles. Through the night, this hum becomes constant background. The engine cycles slightly as the thermostat demands more or less heat, but it never fully stops. The sound remains present, a mechanical companion in the darkness. Drivers learn to read their APU's rhythms, the healthy sound, the normal variations. When something changes, a miss in the cycle, an unusual vibration, a smell that shouldn't be there, experienced drivers notice immediately. The APU represents survival. Attention to its operation becomes instinctive. Maintenance matters profoundly. The APU runs for hundreds of hours through winter. Oil changes happen on strict schedules. Filters get replaced. Fuel lines inspected for leaks. Any problem addressed immediately because a failed APU in minus 35 degrees Celsius represents genuine danger. Some companies maintain spare APUs. If a unit fails, mechanics can swap the entire assembly rather than attempting repairs in extreme cold. The failed unit goes to a heated shop for diagnosis. The truck continues its route without losing nights to repair delays. The APU sits exposed to everything the Canadian winter offers. Snow accumulates around it. Ice forms on its surfaces. The metal housing endures temperature swings from minus 40 degrees Celsius to the engine's operating heat. The unit must function flawlessly despite these conditions. Engineering for this reliability requires robust construction, heavy gauge metal, sealed electrical connections, components rated for extreme temperature operation. Newer APU models include advanced features, remote starting through smartphone apps, GPS tracking that alerts companies if a unit develops problems, fuel consumption monitoring that helps optimize routes and schedules. Some integrate with truck telematics systems, feeding data about operation and efficiency to fleet managers. The cost remains substantial. A quality APU system, fully installed, runs $8,000 to $12,000. For owner-operators, this represents a major investment. For large fleets, equipping hundreds of trucks requires significant capital. But the alternative, paying idling fines, burning excessive fuel, or losing drivers who refuse to freeze, costs more. Canadian trucking companies now consider APUs essential equipment for winter routes. Job postings for northern runs specify APU-equipped trucks. Drivers ask about heating systems before accepting positions. The technology has moved from optional upgrade to industry standard. The APU changed where drivers could park safely. Before these units, staying warm meant keeping the main engine running, which meant positioning where noise wouldn't disturb residents, where idling was permitted, where fuel was accessible. With APUs, a driver could park anywhere safe and rest quietly. The small engine's hum barely carries beyond the truck itself. This quiet matters. Rest areas near towns, parking lots where trucks wait for morning deliveries. Any secure location becomes viable for overnight stops. The flexibility improved both safety and efficiency. Drivers could stop when tired rather than pushing towards specific locations where idling was allowed. The APU sits outside, in the cold, creating warmth that flows inside. This transfer of heat across the boundary between hostile environment and protected space represents the fundamental transaction. that makes winter trucking survivable. The small engine-burning diesel at a fraction of a gallon per hour, converting that fuel into the warmth that lets a human body rest through a northern night. Another solution emerged from European trucking, specialized units designed exclusively for heating. Webasto, Espar, brand names that became generic terms among drivers. Diesel-fired bunk heaters that burn fuel independently from any engine. These units install inside the sleeper cab itself, compact boxes mounted to walls or beneath bunks. They connect to the truck's fuel tank through thin lines that draw diesel in tiny amounts. The heater ignites this fuel in a small combustion chamber, extracts the heat, vents the exhaust safely outside, and distributes warmth through the living space. The efficiency exceeds even APU systems. A bunk heater consumes 0.05 gallons per hour, sometimes less. Through a full night, it might burn half a gallon of fuel while keeping the sleeper cab genuinely warm. No engine runs. No moving parts beyond a small fuel pump and circulation fan. The combustion happens in a sealed chamber. Heat transfers to air that flows through the unit. That warmed air enters the sleeper through vents positioned for optimal distribution. Installation requires precision. The fuel line must tap into the tank without creating leaks or introducing air into the system. The exhaust must route through the truck's exterior wall, positioned where fumes cannot enter the cab. Electrical connections provide power for the control system and circulation fan. A qualified technician needs several hours to install the unit properly. The control panel mounts within easy reach of the bunk, a small digital display. Temperature settings adjustable in single-degree increments, a timer that lets drivers program heating schedules. Some units include remote controls, allowing temperature adjustment without leaving the warmth of blankets. Starting the heater involves pressing a button. The unit runs through a startup sequence. Fuel pump activates. Combustion chamber reaches ignition temperature. Fuel ignites. The fan begins circulating air. Within 2 minutes, warm air flows from the vents. Within 10 minutes, the sleeper temperature begins rising noticeably. The sound becomes intimate. These heaters operate quieter than APUs. A soft whoosh of moving air. A barely audible hum from the combustion process. The sound varies slightly as the unit adjusts to maintain set temperature. Cycles up when more heat is needed. Quiets when the thermostat is satisfied. Drivers describe this sound as comforting, proof that the system functions. Evidence that warmth continues flowing despite the cold beyond the walls. Some drivers say they sleep better with the heater's gentle noise than in complete silence. The sound represents safety. The smell becomes familiar. Diesel combustion produces a distinctive odor, not unpleasant, slightly industrial, a scent that means warmth and survival. When a driver starts the heater at the end of a long day, that first hint of diesel heat in cold air signals the transition from work to rest. The exhaust vents through a small pipe protruding from the truck's exterior. In extreme cold, moisture in the exhaust freezes around this vent, creating elaborate ice formations. Crystals that grow throughout the night as the heater runs. By morning, delicate ice structures surround the exhaust outlet, testament to hours of combustion keeping the interior warm. These heaters handle extreme cold without hesitation. They function at -50 degrees Celsius. The fuel line includes heating elements to prevent diesel from gelling. The combustion chamber reaches temperatures that sustain burning regardless of external conditions. When everything else struggles with cold, the bunk heater continues operating. Maintenance proves straightforward. The combustion chamber requires cleaning annually. Carbon deposits build up over time, reducing efficiency if not removed. The fuel filter needs replacement on schedule. The exhaust pipe should be inspected for obstructions. Beyond these basics, the units run reliably for years. Failures happen, usually fuel delivery issues, a clogged filter, air in the fuel line, problems that prevent fuel from reaching the combustion chamber. Experienced drivers carry spare filters and know the bleeding procedure to clear air from fuel lines. Some problems can be fixed roadside. Others require professional service. A failed heater at -35 degrees Celsius demands immediate response. If repairs aren't possible quickly, the driver must find alternative shelter. Call for service. Relocate to a truck stop with idling areas. In remote areas, this might mean running the main engine despite the cost and regulations because survival takes precedence over rules. The contrast these heaters create becomes profound. Outside, metal contracts in cold. Moisture freezes instantly. Air stings exposed skin. Inside, the temperature holds at 20 degrees Celsius. Warmth so complete a driver can sleep in light clothing. The boundary between these conditions measures only centimeters, the insulated wall of the sleeper cab. This contrast defines the experience of winter trucking, stepping outside into cold that assaults immediately, returning inside to warmth that wraps around like a physical presence. The heater makes this possible, burns tiny amounts of fuel to hold back the winter. Some drivers prefer bunk heaters over APUs. The silence, the lack of moving engine parts, the simplicity of a system dedicated entirely to heating. Other drivers want the electrical generation an APU provides. The choice often depends on individual needs and company equipment standards. Installation costs run lower than APUs, $3,000 to $5,000 for unit and labor. This accessibility means owner-operators can equip their trucks more easily. The payback period shortens because fuel consumption drops so dramatically compared to idling the main engine. Canadian winters pushed these technologies to prominence. European truckers might use bunk heaters occasionally. Canadian drivers rely on them every night for months. The systems prove themselves across thousands of hours of operation in conditions that would disable lesser equipment. The heater becomes trusted. Drivers name their units, speak about them with affection mixed with respect. The mechanical companion that ensures rest is possible. The device that transforms a metal box into a warm refuge. The system that makes a difficult job survivable. Through the night, the heater cycles, maintains temperature, responds to changes, a door opening, body heat from the sleeping driver, fluctuations in external cold. The intelligence built into these systems allows them to operate efficiently without constant adjustment. Morning brings a choice. Some drivers leave the heater running while they prepare for the day. Others shut it down immediately, conserving fuel, accepting the cold that enters when they open doors to begin exterior inspection and snow clearing. The heater's work is done. Through the dark hours, it burned fuel measured in ounces to create warmth measured in survival. Another night passed safely. Another driver rested adequately. The small unit mounted inside the sleeper performed its essential function without drama or failure. The road continues. The heater will be needed again tonight. The image remains. A single truck parked in darkness on a frozen stretch of Canadian highway. Outside, temperatures at -35 degrees Celsius. Wind moving across empty landscape. Snow drifting against tires. Inside, warmth. Light glowing softly through curtained windows. A driver settled into sleep, trusting in preparation and equipment and experience. This scene repeats itself thousands of times each winter night across Canada's vast distances. From the Coquihalla to the ice road, from prairie stretches to northern mining routes. Wherever trucks carry goods through winter, drivers create these small sanctuaries of warmth. The profession demands much, Long hours, isolation, physical discomfort, the constant assessment of conditions and equipment, the acceptance that weather and distance cannot be controlled, only prepared for and endured. Yet drivers return to this work season after season. They master the skills that make survival possible. They develop the routines that turn a metal cab into a functional home. They find satisfaction in competence, in delivering loads despite conditions that keep others stationary. The dignity of this work deserves recognition. These drivers move goods that keep communities supplied, industries operating, lives continuing normally through months when transportation becomes genuinely difficult. The warm grocery store in January, the hardware supplies available for winter repairs, the fuel oil delivered to remote homes. All of this depends on truckers willing to sleep in parking lots at -40 degrees Celsius. The equipment has improved. APUs and bunk heaters replace dangerous idling. Insulation and preparation techniques grow more sophisticated. Communication technology reduces isolation. But the fundamental challenge remains unchanged. Winter in Canada tests human endurance and mechanical reliability with impartial severity. The drivers meet this test, not with bravado or complaint, but with methodical preparation and quiet competence. They know their equipment. They read weather patterns. They make conservative decisions about when to drive and when to wait. They carry the supplies that ensure survival if circumstances worsen. And they sleep. In their carefully prepared sleeper cabs, with heaters humming steadily, they rest before another day of navigation through winter landscape. The night passes. The heater cycles. The cold remains outside, held back by insulation and warm air, and the small amount of fuel burned to sustain comfort. Morning will come. The engine will start. Ice will be cleared. The journey will continue. But for now, in darkness, there is warmth and rest. The quiet dignity of a difficult job done well. Thank you for spending this time exploring how Canadian truckers sleep through brutal winter nights. May your own rest come easily, in warmth and safety, wherever you are. Numbers define the reality of a Canadian winter night in ways that transform simple cold into something else entirely. -30 degrees Celsius. It appears on dashboard displays, weather apps, highway signage, a number. But the figure represents a threshold where the physical world behaves differently, where metal becomes brittle, where exposed skin freezes in minutes, where diesel fuel begins to gel despite additives. At -30, the air feels solid, sharp. Truckers describe it as having weight, having presence, not merely the absence of warmth, but an active force pressing against every surface. The cab becomes an island of positive numbers in a landscape of negatives. Inside, 20 degrees Celsius. Comfortable, breathable. Outside, 30 degrees below zero. The difference between these numbers, 50 degrees, exists within the thickness of sheet metal and insulation, a barrier measured in centimeters holding back temperatures that want to equalize. That will equalize if given opportunity. Heat moves from warm to cold, always, inevitably. The heater burns fuel to create warmth. The warmth radiates into the sleeper space. The metal walls absorb some warmth, conduct it outward. The cold outside pulls heat through every surface, through windows, through the floor, through the roof and walls and every seam. The mathematics are simple. Heat generated must exceed heat lost. When temperatures drop to -40, the equation becomes more demanding. The heating system runs more frequently, burns more fuel, works harder to maintain the same interior temperature it achieved easily at -10. A driver monitors fuel levels with this calculation always present. Each degree colder outside means more fuel consumed overnight. On the coldest nights, a full tank at bedtime might drop noticeably by morning. Experienced drivers know their trucks, know how many hours of heat a half tank provides at -20, how that number changes at -35. They calculate parking locations based on these numbers. If 7 hours of heat remain in the tank but 10 hours until morning, the mathematics require finding fuel before sleeping. The cold also creates physical changes in materials. Metal contracts as temperature drops. The entire truck structure shrinks minutely. Panels that fit together at 20 degrees develop microscopic gaps at -40. These gaps allow cold air infiltration, allow heat escape. Drivers hear this contraction, sharp cracks and groans as metal adjusts to temperature changes. A truck parked at dusk in -15 degrees will produce distinctive sounds as overnight temperatures fall to -35. The structure responding, adapting. Moisture becomes another mathematical problem. A human body exhales water vapor with each breath. In a sealed, heated sleeper cab, this moisture has nowhere to go. It encounters cold window glass, condenses, freezes. Frost forms on the inside of windows despite interior warmth. This frost layer actually provides minor insulation, a thin barrier of ice crystals trapping a bit more heat. But it also indicates moisture saturation. Too much moisture creates condensation on metal surfaces. This water can freeze, creating ice buildup in unwanted places. Ventilation solves this, but creates new mathematics. Opening a vent allows moisture to escape, but also allows heat to escape. The driver balances these losses, cracks a window slightly, loses some warmth, but prevents moisture buildup that will cause larger problems. The human body has its own temperature mathematics. Core temperature must remain near 37 degrees Celsius. The body generates heat through metabolism, burns calories to maintain warmth. In extreme cold, even while sleeping, the body works harder, burns more energy. Drivers wake hungrier after cold nights. The body's furnace consumed resources maintaining temperature. Extremities, fingers, toes, nose, ears, lose heat fastest. Blood flow to these areas reduces as the body prioritizes core temperature. Inside a warm sleeper, this rarely matters, but the brief exposure when checking equipment outside, or scraping ice, or securing a tarp, can freeze fingertips in minutes at -40. Numbers again. Minutes of exposure. Degrees below zero. Seconds until feeling disappears from hands. The heating system itself operates on thermal mathematics. A diesel bunk heater burns perhaps a liter of fuel over 8 hours to heat a small space. An auxiliary power unit might burn 3 liters powering both heat and electrical systems. These consumption rates vary with outside temperature. At -10, the heater cycles on and off, maintains warmth easily. At -40, it runs nearly continuously. Fuel consumption doubles or triples. A driver calculates overnight fuel needs before parking, checks the forecast, checks current temperature, estimates hours until morning, adds a safety margin. The mathematics of cold also dictate preparation timing. Starting a diesel engine at -35 requires either a block heater plugged into shore power or extended cranking that drains batteries. The oil has thickened. The fuel has gelled slightly despite additives. The batteries deliver less current in extreme cold. Drivers know these numbers, know their batteries provide X cranking amps at 20 degrees, but only Y amps at -30. Know whether Y is sufficient to turn over a cold engine. This knowledge determines whether to run the engine briefly during night to keep it warm, or to trust a morning start, or to seek a parking spot with electrical hookup. Each choice has costs. Fuel costs, electrical costs, risk costs. The mathematical reality of extreme cold leaves no room for approximation. A driver who misjudges fuel consumption wakes to a cold cab and a heating system that has exhausted its supply. A driver who misjudges battery capacity in cold turns the key to clicking sounds and an engine that won't start. These miscalculations can become dangerous quickly. But drivers who understand the numbers, who track fuel, monitor temperatures, calculate consumption rates, and plan accordingly, turn mathematics into survival, turn abstract degrees into concrete preparation. The cold is simply physics, heat transfer, energy balance, measurable, predictable. The numbers tell the truth. The driver who listens to them sleeps warm. The sleeper cab is built provides basic protection from cold, but experienced winter drivers modify this space, adding layers and barriers that transform adequate shelter into genuine warmth. These modifications are personal, practical, often homemade. Window covers come first. Factory glass provides minimal insulation, a single pane, or sometimes double paned, but still allowing cold to radiate inward. On a -30 night, frost forms on interior glass despite cabin warmth. Touch the window and cold radiates against your palm. Drivers install insulating covers. Some purchase commercial products, quilted fabric panels with reflective backing, designed specifically for sleeper cab windows. Others create their own. Rigid foam board cut to exact window dimensions. Fabric-covered panels stuffed with batting. Reflective bubble wrap secured with Velcro strips. These covers serve multiple purposes. They block cold radiation from glass, trap a thin layer of still air against the window, prevent interior warmth from escaping through the thermal weakness glass represents. They also block light, create darkness, transform the sleeper into a cave separate from the world outside. Installation is part of the evening routine, each panel placed carefully, secured so no gaps remain around edges. A driver might have 6 or 8 separate pieces, each fitted to a specific window. Removing them in morning reveals windows entirely frosted over, ice crystals coating the glass in intricate patterns. Thermal curtains separate the sleeper from the cab. Most modern sleepers include a factory curtain, but this thin fabric provides minimal insulation. Drivers replace it or supplement it. Heavy quilted curtains, insulated panels on sliding tracks, anything that creates a true thermal barrier between the heated sleeper compartment and the unheated cab. The cab area, with its large windshield and side windows, loses heat rapidly. No point heating this space overnight. The curtain keeps warmth concentrated where it's needed, where the driver sleeps. This separation can reduce heating fuel consumption noticeably. A smaller space requires less energy to warm. Less heat escapes through the cab's extensive glass surfaces. Some drivers add floor insulation. The metal floor conducts cold upward from frozen ground beneath the truck. Factory insulation helps, but not enough on the coldest nights. Foam mats, area rugs, layers of cardboard. Anything that creates a barrier between the sleeper floor and the cold metal beneath. This insulation provides immediate sensory comfort. Bare feet on an insulated floor feel warm. Bare feet on plain metal in -40 weather pull heat from skin almost painfully. The bed itself becomes an insulation system. Multiple blankets, quilts, a sleeping bag rated for extreme cold used as a top layer. Some drivers use electric blankets powered by inverters, creating active warmth rather than just passive insulation. These layers trap body heat, create a microenvironment within the larger environment of the heated sleeper. Even if the heating system cycles off temporarily, the cocoon of bedding maintains warmth. Drivers learn to construct this sleeping space with care. Heavier blankets on top, trapping heat from below. Lighter blankets next to skin, providing comfort. The sleeping bag is an outer shell, sealing everything inside. Air gaps matter. Clothing worn to bed shouldn't compress insulation. Thermal underwear, loose wool socks, a knit cap if the night is especially cold. These layers trap warm air against skin while allowing the bedding layers to do their work. Some drivers position hot water bottles before sleep. Fill a heavy-duty bottle with water, heated on the portable stove. Wrap it in a towel. Place it at the foot of the bed. This thermal mass radiates warmth for hours, keeps feet warm, provides psychological comfort. Ventilation requires careful management within this insulated environment. Too much sealing creates moisture problems. Breath contains water vapor. In a completely sealed space, humidity rises. Condensation forms. Ice develops on cold surfaces. A driver cracks a vent slightly. Allows minimal air exchange. Enough to release moisture, but not enough to lose significant heat. This balance requires adjustment based on outside temperature. At -10, a larger vent opening works. At -40, the smallest crack possible. Some modern sleepers include ventilation systems designed for this. Small fans that exchange air slowly, bringing fresh air in, expelling humid air. These systems can be adjusted, providing just enough exchange to prevent moisture buildup without excessive heat loss. The insulation modifications also serve psychological purposes. Each panel installed, each curtain drawn, each layer added creates a sense of control, of preparation, of building a fortress against the cold. The driver is not passive, hoping factory design will suffice. The driver actively shapes the space, improves it, takes responsibility for their own warmth. This activity provides satisfaction, pride even. Look at what I have built. Look at how warm I remain while the world outside reaches temperatures that would kill in minutes. My planning, my modifications, my knowledge applied, the effectiveness is measurable. A well-insulated sleeper might maintain comfortable temperature while the heating system cycles on for only minutes per hour. A poorly insulated space requires constant heating, burns twice the fuel, provides less comfort. Experienced drivers can feel the difference immediately. Enter another driver's sleeper and sense the heat retention, or lack of it. Notice the window covers, the curtain quality, the floor insulation. Read the space's thermal efficiency. These modifications evolve over time. A driver tries one approach, assesses its effectiveness, adjusts, tries another, learns from other drivers, sees someone else's solution and adapts it. The winter sleeper cab becomes a laboratory of incremental improvement. Each season brings refinements, but the core principle remains constant. Heat is precious. Heat is expensive. Heat must be generated and then guarded carefully. Every gap sealed, every cold surface insulated, every barrier strengthened. The cold outside is patient, relentless, always seeking equilibrium, always trying to equalize temperatures. The insulation is the defense, the barrier, the statement that warmth will be maintained despite the mathematics of cold. Human comfort created and protected in an environment actively hostile to it. The modifications make this possible. Turn survival into rest. Turn endurance into sleep. The decision of where to stop begins hours before the engine shuts down. A driver moving through Saskatchewan in January watches the fuel gauge, watches the clock, watches the horizon for signs of weather building. The next truck stop lies 180 kilometers ahead. The one after that, another 200. In summer, this spacing feels manageable. In winter, It becomes a calculation with consequences. The hours of service regulations allow no flexibility. 10 hours off duty. The clock determines when rest must begin, but the driver determines where. This choice carries weight. Some nights, the decision is simple. A well-known truck stop appears exactly when the logbook demands it. The parking lot offers rows of idling trucks, bright lights, a restaurant serving hot food, showers, Wi-Fi reaching into the sleeper cabs. These stops become familiar landmarks. The driver knows which parking spots fill first, which corner catches the worst wind, where the snow piles create shelter. Other nights offer no such clarity. Weather complicates everything. A forecast showing snow moving in from the west changes the mathematics. A driver might choose to stop earlier than required, accepting a shorter day to avoid parking during a storm, or push slightly harder to reach a better facility before conditions deteriorate. The line between prudent and risky shifts with experience, with weather severity, with road conditions already encountered. The Trans-Canada Highway stretches across provinces with sections where services appear only rarely. A driver crossing northern Ontario or the Manitoba Plains learns to plan around this spacing. Fuel range determines one boundary. Exhaustion determines another. Safety defines the final constraint. Not all parking locations offer equal amenities. The large truck stops provide everything. Smaller rest areas along the highway offer only parking and perhaps an electrical outlet for block heaters. Some nights, a driver pulls into a quiet rest area with nothing but a cleared parking surface and darkness beyond. No building, no lights except what the truck provides, no other vehicles. These isolated stops create a different experience. The silence is profound. The sense of remoteness becomes tangible, but they serve their purpose when location and timing align. The block heater plug matters more in winter than any other amenity. Where available, these electrical outlets allow a driver to plug in the main engine's block heater overnight. The heater warms the engine coolant, ensuring the diesel engine will turn over in the morning, even at -40. Truck stops across the prairies and northern routes provide these plugs as standard equipment. Their presence often determines whether a driver chooses that stop. The evening approach to a chosen parking spot follows its own rhythm. The driver circles through the lot, assessing available spaces, noting which are already occupied, watching for snow piles that might complicate maneuvering. A good spot offers easy exit in the morning, minimal wind exposure, proximity to facilities if needed, and solid ground beneath the snow. The truck eases into position. Air brakes release with their characteristic hiss. The driver sets wheel chocks despite the parking brake. Extra insurance on icy ground. The engine idles for a few more minutes while systems are checked. Fuel level receives attention first. The gauge should show enough diesel to run the auxiliary heater through the night with reserve remaining. Winter diesel, treated with anti-gel additive, stays liquid at lower temperatures than summer fuel, but extreme cold still threatens. Experienced. Drivers keep tanks as full as possible. A full tank has less airspace where moisture can condense and freeze. DEF, diesel exhaust fluid, requires its own check. This urea solution freezes at -11 Celsius. Modern trucks include heated DEF tanks and lines, but drivers verify levels before settling in for the night. A frozen DEF system prevents the truck from operating. Tire pressures drop as temperatures plunge. A tire properly inflated at 0 degrees loses pressure as the thermometer falls to -30. Some drivers carry portable compressors. Others make mental notes to check pressures at the next fuel stop. Tire condition matters especially in winter, where a blowout on an icy highway carries amplified danger. The heating system, whether APU or diesel heater, receives the most critical attention. The driver activates the unit, listening to its startup sequence, feeling for warm air beginning to flow, confirming proper operation before committing to shutdown. Some drivers run the heater for 20 minutes before shutting down the main engine, ensuring the sleeper cab builds warmth. Where block heater plugs exist, the driver exits into the cold one final time. The cord extends from the truck's grill to the outlet post. The connection clicks into place. This simple plug means the difference between an engine that starts smoothly and one that groans and refuses in the morning cold. A final walk around the truck completes the evening routine. Lights are checked. The trailer doors receive a visual confirmation of security. Snow accumulation on the roof and around the wheel wells is noted. The driver looks for anything unusual, anything requiring attention. Then the climb back into the cab. The door seals behind. The outside world becomes separated by metal and glass. The main engine shuts down. The distinctive diesel rumble fades. The auxiliary heater or diesel burner continues its quieter operation. The truck settles into its night configuration, a small island of warmth in a landscape of cold. The driver has found harbor. The preparation is complete. The night can begin. The sequence of actions follows the same order each night. Not from written instruction, but from repetition that has carved the pattern into muscle memory. The truck is parked. The wheel chocks are set. Now the interior work begins. The driver's seat swivels to face the sleeper cab. This rotation marks the transition from driving to living. The space behind the seats becomes the focus. Organization matters in a sleeper cab. Everything has its place because the space allows no room for chaos. The driver moves through the confined area with practiced efficiency, preparing the environment for the hours ahead. Window covers come first. These insulated panels or heavy curtains fit precisely over the sleeper cab windows, blocking the glass that radiates cold into the interior. Some are commercial products designed for specific truck models. Others are homemade. Reflectix insulation cut to size, fabric panels stuffed with batting, even cardboard layered with emergency blankets. The method varies. The purpose remains constant. Each cover fits into position. Velcro strips hold some in place. Others wedge into the window frames. The effect is immediate. The cold radiating from the glass diminishes. The sense of enclosure increases. The world outside becomes less visible, less immediate. The thermal curtain that separates the sleeper from the cab comes next. This heavy barrier, sometimes insulated, sometimes simply thick fabric, blocks the larger windshield's cold influence. It hangs on a track or clips into position. When drawn, it creates a smaller space to heat. The auxiliary system works less. The warmth concentrates. The driver adjusts the heater controls. Temperature settings vary by personal preference and system type. Some prefer a steady, moderate warmth. Others set it lower, relying more on blankets and sleeping bags. The heater responds, its fan speed changing, the airflow adjusting. Ventilation requires attention even in winter. A completely sealed sleeper cab accumulates moisture from breathing, from any cooking, from the body's water vapor. This moisture condenses on cold surfaces, the windows beneath their covers, the metal walls, the ceiling. In extreme cold, it freezes into frost patterns. Some drivers crack a window slightly despite the temperature, allowing air exchange. Others rely on the heater's air intake to provide circulation. The bed receives preparation next. Most sleeper cabs include a mattress as standard equipment, though many drivers replace these with higher quality versions. The bedding varies widely. Some use conventional sheets and blankets. Others prefer sleeping bags rated for cold weather. Many combine both: sleeping bag for primary insulation, blankets for adjustment. The layering strategy mirrors cold weather camping. A bottom layer provides insulation from the mattress. The sleeping bag or heavy blankets create the primary thermal barrier. A top layer allows temperature adjustment through the night. The driver arranges these elements, testing that everything is within reach. That adjustment is possible without leaving the cocoon. Clothing for sleep requires its own decision. Some drivers sleep in thermal underwear and heavy socks. Others prefer minimal clothing inside a warm sleeping bag. The calculus involves balancing comfort against the need to respond quickly if something goes wrong. A heater failure at 3 in the morning requires immediate action, and that action is easier when already partially clothed. A flashlight or headlamp finds its place within arm's reach. The overhead LED lights in the sleeper cab work well, but a small directional light allows checking something without flooding the space with brightness. This matters if the driver wakes and needs to investigate a sound or check a gauge without fully rousing. Water is positioned nearby. A bottle or thermos, sometimes placed in an insulated holder to prevent freezing. The dry air inside a heated cab creates thirst. Having water accessible prevents the need to leave the bed's warmth. Any evening meal preparation happens now, before settling fully into the sleeping configuration. The driver might heat water for instant coffee or soup using a small electric kettle powered by the truck's inverter. Simple food that requires only hot water: ramen, dehydrated camping meals, instant oatmeal. The process is utilitarian. The warmth is what matters as much as the nutrition. The routine includes checking the phone, plugging it into the charger, perhaps a call or text to family, updating location, confirming safety. The signal strength varies dramatically. Some truck stops have strong cellular coverage. Remote rest areas might have none. The driver sends what messages are possible, knowing the next communication might not occur until morning. The logbook receives its final entries for the day. Electronic logging devices record driving time automatically, but the driver reviews the data, confirming accuracy, noting the location. This record-keeping is legal requirement, but it also provides a rhythm to the day's end. Some drivers maintain additional notes: a paper journal recording weather conditions, road states, unusual occurrences. Others keep mental logs only. The practice varies, but many find value in tracking patterns across weeks and months of winter driving. The exterior lights are switched off except for parking lights. The bright running lights and marker lights that made the truck visible during driving serve no purpose parked. Their glow would only illuminate falling snow or attract attention. The parking lights remain, small amber markers indicating the truck's presence in the darkness. The cab's interior lights dim to night settings. Many trucks allow adjusting the dashboard illumination. The driver reduces this to minimal levels. The sleeper cab's overhead lights turn off completely. The only light remaining comes from the heater's small indicator panel, the phone screen, perhaps a small reading light if the driver plans to read before sleeping. The noise environment settles into its overnight pattern. The heater's hum provides constant background sound. The fan cycles on and off. Outside, wind might be audible. Other trucks in the lot contribute their own sounds: the higher pitch of idling main engines from older trucks without APUs, the occasional air brake release, the crunch of snow under tires as a late arrival maneuvers into position. The driver performs one final mental inventory: fuel sufficient, heater running properly, warmth building, water available, phone charged. alarms set for the morning departure time. Everything necessary is within the small space. The body settles into the sleeping position. The layers of bedding are adjusted. The final organization of pillows and blankets creates the night's configuration. The checklist is complete. The preparation has created a small sphere of warmth and safety. The cold outside continues its work, but inside, the systems hold. Sleep becomes possible. Food becomes more than fuel when temperatures fall below -30 degrees Celsius and darkness settles over a truck stop parking lot. The preparation of even the simplest meal takes on significance. It provides warmth. It creates routine. It fills time that would otherwise stretch empty across the evening hours. Most sleeper cabs contain some version of a cooking setup: a small 12-volt electric kettle, a portable propane camp stove secured carefully on a stable surface, perhaps a microwave powered by the APU or a plug-in hot plate. These tools allow drivers to heat water and prepare basic hot food without leaving the protected interior. The meals themselves tend toward simplicity. Canned soup transferred to a small pot. Instant noodles in a plastic bowl. Packaged stew heated directly in its container. Oatmeal mixed with hot water. Coffee, always coffee, brewed strong in a travel mug or small pot. The process matters as much as the result. Retrieving the ingredients from wherever they're stored. Setting up the heating element. Waiting as water comes to temperature or contents begin to bubble. These small actions create structure. They mark the transition from driving to resting, from motion to stillness. The smells matter too. The sharp scent of instant coffee mixing with the faint diesel odor that never quite leaves a sleeper cab. Chicken noodle soup releasing steam that briefly fogs the small windows. The particular aroma of camp stove propane mixing with whatever is cooking above the flame. Heat rises from the food. It warms hands wrapped around a bowl or mug. It warms the face leaning over the steam. It adds to the overall warmth being generated by the bunk heater cycling through its intervals. Some drivers eat sitting on their bunk. Others have rigged small fold-down tables or use a board placed across their lap. The meal is consumed slowly, deliberately. There is no rush. Outside, snow may be falling steadily. Wind may be rattling the trailer behind. Inside, there is soup and bread and the small satisfaction of something warm entering the body. Cleanup is equally methodical, washing a bowl and spoon using bottled water or melted snow if water supplies are limited. Storing everything back in its designated space. The cab must remain organized. Space is too limited for disorder. These meals provide nutrition, certainly. They offer calories that will help maintain body temperature through the night. But their value extends beyond the purely physical. The ritual creates normalcy. It connects this frozen parking lot to every other place humans prepare and consume food. It transforms survival into living. The driver is not merely enduring the cold and waiting for morning. He is making dinner. He is taking care of himself. He is performing an act that humans have performed in countless contexts across all of history. The warmth lingers after the meal is finished. Internal warmth from the food itself. The ambient warmth that cooking has added to the cab's atmosphere. The psychological warmth of having completed a familiar, comforting routine. Some drivers call home while eating. A phone propped against the windshield or dashboard. A video call connecting this isolated cab to a kitchen table hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. The meal becomes shared even across distance. Others eat in silence. They watch snow accumulate on the windshield. They listen to the wind and the heater and the occasional sound of another truck moving through the lot. The meal becomes meditation. a quiet moment of focus on something simple and manageable. The ritual will repeat tomorrow night, and the night after. The same simple foods prepared the same simple ways. But each repetition reinforces the structure that makes this life sustainable. It proves that warmth and nourishment are achievable even here, even now, even when the thermometer reads -35 degrees Celsius and the world outside is frozen and dark. The phone screen glows in the dim cab. A face appears, pixelated slightly where the signal struggles. A kitchen becomes visible behind. Familiar walls, familiar lighting. A world that exists in warmth and permanence. Communication technology has transformed winter trucking. Drivers who once went days without speaking to family now video call from parking lots. They text updates throughout the day. They send photos of landscapes and weather conditions. They maintain presence even in absence. The calls often happen in the evening, after the truck is parked and secured, after the heater has been running long enough to make the cab comfortable. The driver settles on his bunk, back against the wall, phone held at arm's length. Where are you tonight? The question requires checking maps, remembering the last town passed. About 2 hours north of Thunder Bay, stopped early because of the snow. The face on the screen shows concern, shows relief that he's stopped rather than pushing through dangerous conditions, shows the particular expression that comes from loving someone whose work involves risk. Children appear sometimes, leaning into frame. Hi, Dad. When are you coming home? Did you see any moose? The driver answers, tells them about the landscape, the weather, the things he's seen. He keeps his voice light. He does not mention the ice fog that reduced visibility to 20 meters. He does not describe the hours of white-knuckle driving before finding this parking spot. He protects them from the reality of the conditions while sharing the journey. Partners discuss logistics, bills that need attention, decisions about the house or vehicle or children's schedules. The ordinary business of family life continues, whether he is present or not. The calls help him remain part of these decisions, remain connected to the daily flow of home. Sometimes the calls are brief. Just wanted to hear your voice. Just checking in. A few minutes to confirm safety, to maintain the thread of connection, then both parties return to their separate evenings. Other times they stretch longer. The driver describes his day in detail. The partner shares the details of hers. They talk about nothing important, which makes it everything important. They fill the silence that would otherwise occupy the cab. The technology is imperfect. Video freezes, audio cuts out. The call drops entirely and must be reestablished. But even these frustrations are preferable to the alternative, the years when drivers used payphones at truck stops, feeding quarters for brief conversations, or waited days between calls when routes ran through areas with no phone access at all. Some drivers watch downloaded shows or movies on tablets. They create a sense of entertainment and normalcy. The small screen becomes a window into fiction, into other lives, into anything other than the frozen darkness pressing against the real windows. Others listen to podcasts or audiobooks, voices speaking about history or science or stories, companionship of a sort, human speech filling the space even when no conversation is possible. Music plays from phones or small speakers. Each driver has preferences. Some want country music, songs about roads and distance. Others prefer rock, metal, classical, anything that matches or counters their current mood. But the live connection, the call that allows real-time conversation with someone who knows you and cares whether you're safe, holds unique value. It confirms that the isolation is temporary. It proves that home still exists, that people still wait, that this frozen parking lot is not the entire world. The calls end eventually. I should let you go. Get some sleep. Drive safe tomorrow. Love you. The screen goes dark. The face disappears. The cab returns to containing only one person. But something has shifted. The driver is not simply alone in a truck. He is someone connected to others. He is part of a family, a relationship, a network of people who think about him even when they cannot see him. The phone is placed on its charger. The small LED light indicates it's powering up for tomorrow. The connection will be available again when needed. The technology sits ready, a link to the distant world of warmth and relationships and home. Outside, snow continues falling. Wind continues pushing against metal. The temperature continues dropping toward its nighttime minimum. Inside, the heater cycles on. The sleeping bag is arranged. The pillow is positioned. The driver is alone, but not alone. Connected across distance. Held in a web of communication that makes the isolation bearable, even sometimes peaceful. The night settles in. The calls are finished. The truck is silent except for familiar sounds. Rest becomes possible. Inside the sleeper cab, light becomes precious. A small LED strip runs along the ceiling edge, warm white, dimmable. It casts just enough glow to read by, to see the interior space without harsh brightness. Some drivers add a clip-on reading light above the bunk, a flexible neck, directed exactly where it's needed. The light doesn't reach far. It illuminates the immediate space, the mattress, the storage cabinets along the walls, the small area where a driver can sit upright. Beyond the sleeper curtain, the main cab holds different darkness. The dashboard electronics glow faintly, green and amber indicators, the subtle pulse of systems maintaining themselves, but the windows show nothing. Outside, darkness is complete. No streetlights, no buildings, no distant glow of towns. The parking area sits kilometers from the nearest community. The landscape holds no ambient light. Snow covers everything, but in darkness, this whiteness becomes invisible. The world beyond the glass simply ends. Frost builds on the inside surface of the windshield. Delicate patterns, crystalline formations that catch and scatter what little light reaches them from the sleeper. These patterns grow slowly, fed by moisture from breathing, from the air itself. They create a translucent barrier, a natural insulation that also marks the absolute boundary between two different worlds. The driver closes the blackout curtains that separate sleeper from cab. Heavy fabric, insulated. They block drafts from the larger cab space and contain the sleeper's warmth. They also complete the enclosure. The sleeper becomes a small room unto itself, self-contained, a capsule of warmth and light floating in frozen darkness. The heater runs. Its warm air flows from vents near the floor. The temperature inside hovers around 18 degrees Celsius, comfortable for sleeping when properly layered. The warmth rises slowly, creating gentle circulation. No cold spots. No drafts once the curtains are drawn and the sleeper sealed. A phone screen glows, blue-white light, brighter than the LED strips. It illuminates the driver's face as they check weather updates one final time, send a last message home, set an alarm. The screen's light seems harsh in the dim interior. When it dims to sleep mode, the sleeper seems darker for a moment, eyes adjusting back to the softer illumination. Some drivers keep a small battery-powered lantern within reach. Emergency backup. If the APU fails, if the heater stops, this light continues. It hangs from a hook or sits in a cubby. Rarely needed, always there. The sensory experience is one of compression and focus. The vast Canadian landscape disappears. The highway, the weather, The kilometers ahead all become irrelevant for these hours. The world reduces to this small space, this warmth, this light. Everything necessary is within arm's reach. Water bottle, snacks, flashlight, radio, the essentials of survival condensed into a space smaller than most bathrooms. The contrast between interior and exterior is absolute. Inside, controlled temperature, soft light, the hum of machinery keeping systems alive, the familiar textures of bedding and surfaces touched daily. Outside, temperatures that would kill an unprepared person within hours, darkness so complete it disorients, wind that finds every gap and tests every seal, cold that turns metal brittle and makes exposed skin burn. The walls and windows separate these realities by centimeters. The glass of the sleeper's small window might be a quarter-inch thick. The walls, insulated but thin by building standards. Yet, they hold. They maintain the difference between survival and exposure. Some drivers leave one curtain partially open, a gap of a few inches. They can see out the side window, or rather, see that there is a window, that darkness exists beyond it. This small connection to the outside world provides orientation. When they wake in the night, they know immediately where they are. The darkness confirms it. They're on the road, in the sleeper. The small space makes sense because the vast space surrounds it. Others seal everything completely. Total enclosure. The sleeper becomes a cave, a den. No visual reference to the exterior cold. This helps some drivers rest more deeply. The mind releases the landscape. The body accepts the warmth without constant reminder of what waits beyond the walls. The quality of light changes as sleep approaches. The driver dims the LED strips. The glow softens further, eyes adjust. Details fade. The interior becomes less a visible space and more a felt presence. Warmth and darkness in careful balance. Before the lights go entirely dark, there's a moment, brief, repeated every night, when the driver can see their breath as a faint mist in the coolest air near the ceiling, illuminated by the dimming LEDs, before it dissipates into the heated space below. A reminder that cold is never truly absent, only managed, only held at bay by systems that continue their work through the night. Then the lights go off. The heater continues. The darkness becomes complete, except for the tiny status LEDs on the phone, on the heater control. Small constellations of red and green holding their ground against the night. The sleeper is warm. The sleeper is dark. The sleeper is safe. Outside, winter continues. Inside, for these hours, it doesn't matter. The driver begins the preparation while still dressed for the cab. Jacket off first. The heavy winter coat hangs on a hook. The insulated bib overalls come off next, stepped out of carefully in the confined space. These outer layers aren't needed in the heated sleeper. They would cause overheating, sweating, discomfort. But they remain close, within immediate reach. If something goes wrong in the night, if the heater fails, if a problem requires going outside, these layers must be accessible instantly. Underneath, the driver wears a thermal base layer, long underwear, synthetic or merino wool. This layer stays on. It provides the first line of insulation for sleeping. Over this, some drivers add a fleece pullover. Others prefer a thermal shirt. The goal is warmth without bulk. Layers that allow movement in the sleeping bag but trap body heat effectively. Socks matter. The driver removes the heavy wool socks worn for driving and replaces them with clean thermal socks. Fresh socks for sleeping. This serves two purposes: comfort and moisture management. Feet sweat during the day. Damp socks lose insulating value. Clean, dry socks maintain warmth through the night. Some drivers sleep in 2 pairs, an inner layer of thin merino wool, an outer layer of thicker thermal socks. A knit cap sits ready. A toque. Most drivers don't wear it immediately, but it's positioned next to the pillow. If the night grows colder than expected, if the heater struggles, if the driver wakes feeling chilled, the hat goes on. Significant heat loss occurs through the head. The simple addition of a toque can make the difference between cold discomfort and adequate warmth. The sleeping bag waits on the bunk. Most drivers use bags rated for temperatures well below what they expect inside the sleeper. A bag rated for -20 Celsius provides insurance, even if the interior temperature drops, even if the heater cycles off periodically. The sleeping bag maintains warmth. The driver climbs in fully clothed. The bag's insulation surrounds the layered clothing, creating a microenvironment. Some drivers add a blanket over the sleeping bag. Extra weight, extra warmth. The layering principle applies not just to clothing, but to bedding. Multiple barriers trap heat more effectively than a single thick layer. The pillow is standard, nothing special required, but its position matters. The driver arranges it away from the wall where cold radiates through, centered on the bunk where the heater's warmth circulates most effectively. Before settling in completely, the driver checks extremities. Hands warm, feet warm. These areas cool first and signal problems. If fingers or toes feel cold before sleep, more layers are needed. The body won't warm them once asleep. They'll only grow colder. Water sits within reach. A bottle. Room temperature, not cold. Drinking cold water before sleep lowers core temperature. Room temperature hydrates without creating internal chill. The driver takes a few sips, enough to prevent waking with dry mouth, not so much that bladder pressure interrupts sleep. Leaving the sleeper in the night means entering cold spaces, dressing partially, losing accumulated warmth. Better to calibrate hydration carefully. The driver's movements slow. The body shifts toward rest. The transition from activity to sleep requires this preparation, this gradual reduction. The mind begins to release the day's driving. The body settles into the specific posture that works for sleeping in this narrow space. Most drivers sleep on their sides. The bunk's width doesn't comfortably accommodate back sleeping for larger individuals. Side position also allows the sleeping bag to drape more effectively, eliminating gaps where cold air might penetrate. Some curl slightly. A loose fetal position. This reduces the body's surface area, conserving heat. It also feels protective, the position humans naturally adopt when cold. The final check happens mostly by feel. The driver runs through a mental list. Heater running, alarm set, phone charged, outer clothes accessible, water available, body warm. Each item confirmed by touch or sound rather than sight in the dimming light. Breathing deepens, slower, more regular. The body's preparation for sleep proceeds on its own now. Heart rate drops, muscles relax. The day's tension, the focus required for winter driving, the constant vigilance, the physical bracing against cold, begins to release. The sleeping bag's warmth accumulates. Body heat reflects back. The insulation does its work. Within 10 minutes, the microenvironment inside the bag reaches a stable, comfortable temperature, warm enough for deep sleep, not so warm that sweating begins. The driver's awareness of the truck diminishes. The heater's hum fades from conscious attention. The small sounds of the sleeper, the fabric of the sleeping bag shifting, the slight creaks of the bunk's frame, become background, unnoticed. What remains is warmth, darkness, and the gradual descent into sleep. The body prepared, the space secured, the cold held outside where it belongs. The sleeper cab at night is never truly silent. Even when parked in the most remote locations, far from traffic and human activity, the acoustic environment remains rich with sound. Each noise carries information. Each pattern tells a story about conditions outside, about systems functioning or failing, about the night unfolding around the metal shell. The auxiliary heater provides the foundational sound, a steady hum, not loud but constant. It cycles in predictable patterns. The ignition clicks. The combustion chamber whooshes softly. The fan pushes warm air through the vents. This rhythm becomes the baseline against which all other sounds are measured. The heater runs for 12 minutes. It shuts off for 8. It restarts with a distinctive sequence of clicks and ignitions. Within 3 nights, most drivers know this pattern so completely they notice instantly when the timing shifts. A longer off-cycle might indicate low fuel pressure. A rougher ignition suggests moisture in the fuel line. The heater's voice becomes familiar, readable. Wind against the cab creates an entire vocabulary of sound. Steady wind produces a low whistle through mirror assemblies and roof vents. Gusting wind generates rhythmic pulses. Crosswinds rock the trailer slightly, creating a gentle swaying sensation accompanied by creaks from the fifth wheel connection. Strong winds find every gap in the aerodynamic shell, producing high-pitched whistles that rise and fall in pitch as wind speed varies. In extreme cold, metal contracts. This happens slowly as temperatures drop through the evening. It happens suddenly when wind shifts or clouds move. The contractions produce sharp cracks and groans. The sound is startling at first, a loud snap in the darkness. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. The trailer walls flex. The frame members adjust. The cab roof contracts fractionally. These sounds are normal, harmless, but they require weeks of experience to interpret as such. Snow accumulation creates its own acoustic signature. Fresh snow falls almost silently at first, but as it accumulates on the cab roof, on the trailer top, on every horizontal surface, the quality of outside sound changes. Everything becomes muffled. Distant highway noise fades further. Wind sounds lose their sharp edges. The world takes on a padded, insulated quality. Heavy snow creates soft impacts, a weighted sound against metal. As depth increases, the load becomes audible. The cab roof receives the accumulation differently than the flat trailer top. Drivers learn to hear when snow depth passes 10 centimeters, then 20. The muffling intensifies. The weight sometimes produces subtle flexing sounds. Between gusts in the calm moments, true silence occasionally emerges. This silence is profound, absolute. In remote northern parking areas, with no traffic, no settlements nearby, no industrial activity, the quiet becomes almost physical. It presses against the ears. The heater hum seems loud by contrast, even breathing sounds pronounced. This silence exists nowhere else in modern life. It belongs to wilderness, to winter, to distances measured in hours rather than minutes. Some drivers find this silence peaceful, meditative, a rare gift in an endlessly noisy world. Others find it unsettling, too complete, too empty. The CB radio offers optional connection. Left on low volume, it provides human voices. Fragmented conversations between drivers on the same highway, separated by kilometers but sharing the same night. Someone reports road conditions ahead. Someone else mentions a closed rest area. Brief exchanges, practical information wrapped in camaraderie. The radio breaks isolation without requiring participation. Its presence confirms that others exist, that this experience, though solitary, is simultaneously shared by hundreds of drivers scattered across frozen routes. Some nights the radio stays silent, channels empty, everyone sleeping or listening without transmitting. Other nights it murmurs continuously, voices appearing and fading as distances shift. Sleep in the sleeper cab is different from sleep in a stationary home. It exists in layers. The body rests, muscles relax, breathing slows, but a portion of awareness remains active, monitoring, listening, evaluating the stream of sounds and sensations that continue through the night. This is not insomnia, not restlessness. It is vigilance, a learned skill that develops over months and years of winter nights. The mind learns which sounds require attention and which can be safely ignored. It learns to sleep through normal variations while instantly registering abnormal ones. Wind rocking the truck creates gentle lateral movement. The suspension compresses and releases. The cab sways perhaps 5 centimeters side to side. This motion is constant in exposed parking areas during winter storms. It feels disturbing during the first experiences, like sleeping on a boat. The body tenses against it. But within weeks, the motion becomes expected, normal. The mind categorizes it as safe. Sleep continues through the swaying. Only when the movement exceeds usual patterns does awareness sharpen. Exceptionally strong gusts might require checking whether the parking brake remains set, whether the trailer could be affected. The heater cycling creates another pattern requiring calibration. The ignition sequence becomes so familiar that deviation registers immediately. A failed ignition attempt produces a click without the following whoosh. The absence of expected sound triggers awareness. The driver surfaces from sleep, listening, evaluating. The heater attempts ignition again. If it succeeds, sleep resumes. If it fails twice, intervention becomes necessary. Temperature changes penetrate sleep. The cab cooling beyond a certain threshold generates physical awareness. Cold air on the face. The sleeping bag feeling less sufficient. These sensations build gradually but eventually cross a threshold that demands response. The driver wakes enough to check the heater, adjust settings, add layers. Experienced drivers describe this monitoring state as partial consciousness, not fully asleep, not fully awake, suspended between states, resting while remaining connected to the environment. Snow accumulation on the roof creates gradually increasing weight. Usually this proceeds slowly and harmlessly. But heavy, wet snow in certain temperature ranges can accumulate faster than anticipated. The sound profile changes. The cab creaks under load. Awareness registers the change. The driver evaluates whether the accumulation requires midnight clearing or can wait until morning. Vehicles approaching the parking area trigger alertness. Engine sounds. Headlights sweeping across the curtained windows. The sounds of another truck parking nearby. These events require brief assessment. Is the approaching vehicle parking safely? Is distance adequate? Does anything seem unusual? Most arrivals are routine. Another driver finding the same rest area. Parking, shutting down. The sounds fade into the night's normal pattern. Occasionally something registers as wrong. A vehicle too close. Movement around the truck. Voices. These sounds demand fuller awareness. Investigation. The ability to distinguish between sounds requiring attention and those that do not becomes refined over time. New drivers wake repeatedly, uncertain, checking. Veterans sleep through the harmless while responding instantly to the significant. This skill cannot be taught directly, only experienced. The body learns. The mind calibrates. The distinction between normal and abnormal becomes intuitive rather than conscious. The quality of this sleep is never as deep as home sleep. Studies measuring trucker sleep patterns confirm what drivers report: reduced REM cycles, more frequent brief arousals, lighter overall sleep architecture. The body rests. Fatigue diminishes. But full restoration requires the deeper sleep that comes only in completely safe, familiar environments. Some drivers describe winter truck sleep as resembles the vigilant rest of soldiers in field conditions. Recovery happens. Alertness persists. The relationship between driver and vehicle becomes intimate through these nights. The truck's sounds become as familiar as a partner's breathing. Deviations register with the same immediacy. The dependence becomes mutual. The driver monitors the truck's systems. The truck provides shelter and warmth. Neither can survive the night alone. This bond intensifies during extreme weather, when temperatures reach dangerous thresholds, when storms isolate the vehicle completely. The trust placed in mechanical systems becomes absolute. The responsibility to monitor them becomes paramount. Morning brings relief from this vigilance. Full consciousness returns. Systems receive complete assessment. But through the dark hours, this partial awareness sustains survival, allowing rest, maintaining safety, balancing the body's need for sleep against the environment's demand for attention. Not every night goes according to plan. Sometimes, at 2 a.m, the steady hum of the bunk heater stops. The silence wakes you. Within minutes, the cold begins to move through the cab. You reach for the control panel. You press buttons. Nothing happens. The temperature inside is still warm, but you know how quickly that will change. At -30 outside, you have perhaps an hour before the cab becomes dangerously cold. You sit up. You pull on extra layers. You find your flashlight. The troubleshooting begins. Methodical, practiced, fighting the urge to panic. Check the fuel supply to the heater. Check the electrical connections. Check the exhaust vent outside for blockage. Sometimes snow has drifted against the truck, covering the heater's intake. You'll need to go outside to check. Preparing to step into -30 takes mental preparation. You dress quickly. Heavy coat, boots, gloves, hat. You open the door. The cold hits like a physical force. You move fast. You clear the vent. You return inside. You restart the heater. It catches. Warmth begins flowing again. Other times, the problem resists simple fixes. The heater won't restart. You consider your options. Calling for roadside assistance means waiting hours in the cold. Some drivers choose to start the main engine despite anti-idling laws. Survival overrides regulation. Others bundle every blanket they have and wait for dawn. Heavy snowfall brings different challenges. You wake to check the windows. You can't see out. Snow has covered the glass entirely. You've been buried while you slept. During a blizzard, sleep becomes surreal. The wind creates constant motion. The truck rocks gently on its suspension. Snow hits the windows in waves, soft impacts, thousands of them, creating steady white noise that fills the darkness. You lie in your bunk watching the window. You see nothing but white. The world has disappeared. The swirling snow moves in patterns that hypnotize. No ground, no sky, no horizon. Only white movement, infinite and directionless. Some drivers don't sleep during extreme weather. They stay partially awake, monitoring. They listen to the wind. They feel the truck's movement. They judge whether conditions are worsening. Complete whiteout conditions mean visual isolation so total that time loses meaning. Minutes and hours blend together. The sound changes during heavy snowfall. Everything becomes muffled. The usual highway sounds, distant traffic, wind across open space, disappear beneath the steady accumulation of snow. The silence underneath the wind feels thick. The cab becomes more isolated with each passing hour. Morning reveals the aftermath. Snow has drifted against the truck's sides. The windows show white pressed against glass. Before you can drive, you must dig out. You must clear snow from the entire vehicle. The task takes an hour or more in bitter cold. But through the night, inside the warm cab, the storm remains outside. The heater runs steadily. The blankets hold their warmth. You sleep in the center of the blizzard, trusting the metal walls and the heating system and your preparation. The world disappears in white. You close your eyes. The wind continues. Morning will bring its own challenges. For now, you rest. There is something profound about sleeping alone in a metal box, surrounded by darkness and brutal cold. The nearest human being might be 20 kilometers away, 30, perhaps more. Help, if needed, would take time to arrive. The land outside stretches in every direction, frozen and indifferent. This reality creates a background awareness, a quiet understanding of vulnerability that persists even as sleep approaches. Yet many drivers describe something unexpected, a meditative quality to these winter nights, a sense of presence that comes from the enforced simplicity. Winter trucking strips life to its essentials: warmth, rest, forward movement, basic sustenance. Nothing decorative, nothing excess. The cab becomes a world reduced to what actually matters. Some drivers report sleeping better in winter than in summer. The explanation varies, but a common thread emerges. The cocoon-like enclosure feels protective rather than confining. The heater's steady rhythm becomes reassuring. The darkness outside, absolute and complete, removes visual distraction. There is trust involved, trust in equipment, trust in preparation, trust in the systems that keep the small space warm while the world beyond the windows reaches temperatures incompatible with human survival. This trust allows rest. The vulnerability remains, but it becomes something known, something accounted for, a condition accepted rather than feared. And in that acceptance, some drivers find a particular kind of peace. Morning arrives slowly in Canadian winter. The darkness begins to thin. The quality of black shifts toward deep blue. Inside the sleeper, the driver wakes to familiar sounds. The heater still running. Wind against metal. The particular silence that means deep cold. The first task is assessment. Temperature gauge, fuel level, systems check, everything still functioning as it should. Then comes the work of preparing to move. Starting a diesel engine at -30 or -40 requires care. Even with block heaters, even with proper preparation, the oil is thick, the fuel is cold, metal has contracted through the night. The process is methodical. Turn the key to activate glow plugs. Wait. Listen to the engine turn over. Let it catch. Hold idle steady while fluids begin to circulate. No rushing. The engine warms slowly, allowed to reach operating temperature before any demand is placed on it. Outside, the rig has become a structure of ice and snow. Every surface bears accumulation from the night. Legally and practically, this must be removed before driving. The driver climbs down into air that burns the lungs, begins the physical work of brushing snow from the entire length of a 53-foot trailer, clearing mirrors, breaking ice from door handles, checking frozen components, air lines, brake lines, connections that must flex and function despite the cold. The first hour of morning driving is often the coldest. The heater works to warm the cab. The engine gradually reaches full operating temperature. The body slowly recovers from exposure to the brutal air outside. And the landscape, revealed in dawn light, stretches white and endless in every direction. The profession requires a particular temperament, comfort with solitude, mechanical capability, patience with conditions beyond anyone's control. the ability to find contentment in routine rather than variety. Many winter truckers describe a deep satisfaction in mastering difficult conditions. There is pleasure in self-reliance, in knowing your equipment, in reading weather, in making correct decisions when circumstances shift. The lifestyle attracts those who find peace in the rhythm of long-distance travel. In the simplicity the road imposes, fewer choices, clearer purposes, the cab becomes enough. There is quiet dignity in this work, unglamorous, often unseen, absolutely essential. Winter hauling schedules remain unpredictable. Storms add days to planned routes. Drivers develop intimate knowledge of weather patterns, of road conditions, of which stopping points offer safety when forecasts change. The relationship with dispatch becomes crucial. Understanding when to push forward, when to wait out conditions. Many haul time-sensitive freight. The pressure exists even when conditions turn dangerous. These nights in frozen parking lots, repeated hundreds of times each season, form the backbone of Canadian logistics. Groceries reach northern communities because someone slept at -40 in a rest area. Fuel arrives at remote stations because a driver idled an auxiliary heater through a blizzard. The work connects directly to survival in isolated regions, to functioning supply chains across a vast geography, to the basic infrastructure that makes Canadian winter life possible. The COVID-19 pandemic briefly highlighted the essential nature of truckers. Public awareness followed, then faded. The work continued regardless. The industry faces driver shortages. Younger generations show less attraction to the demanding lifestyle. Technology improves some aspects: better heaters, communication tools, weather tracking systems. But fundamental challenges remain unchanged. Autonomous truck development may eventually transform the profession. Winter conditions, however, remain beyond current automation capabilities. Ice, whiteouts, equipment failures in extreme cold. These still require human judgment, human adaptation. For now, the glowing cab in darkness continues. The heater cycles, the driver sleeps, the freight moves north. The glow persists through darkness. A single cab light, frost patterns spreading across glass. Beyond the window, the world remains frozen, silent, vast. Inside, warmth holds. A driver rests. The heater cycles. Snow accumulates on metal surfaces, undisturbed. This is the nightly reality for thousands who move goods across winter distances. Unglamorous work, essential work. The kind that continues regardless of temperature, regardless of isolation. They've turned vehicles into temporary homes, found comfort in diesel heat and insulated walls, mastered the art of rest in places not designed for rest. Tomorrow, engines will start, ice will be cleared, the journey will continue. But for now, in this moment, there is only the small sanctuary of the sleeper cab, the quiet dignity of adaptation, the human capacity to find home, even here.